Hello there guys, I'm Unstable Voltage and welcome to my Europa Universalis 4 tutorial for Common Sense. In this video I'm going to be talking about colonisation because it's a topic that I've had quite a few people asking me about. So what is colonisation? Well, basically at the start of the game there are several provinces around the world which are classed as being uncolonised. They don't have anybody living there, they don't belong to any specific nation, and the only inhabitants is a pseudo-nation referred to in the game as natives. Now, there are quite a few colonisable provinces around the world. We'll just zoom out at the map, and obviously this is in the game map menu so that we can actually see the entire world uncovered. If we go over here, we can see that there is a lot of area in northern Russia and Siberia which is uncolonised. So all of these grey provinces up here, these are uncolonised provinces. If we click on them, nothing happens because they are uncolonised. The darker grey areas, they can't be colonised. That's wasteland. You can't travel there, you can't do anything with it. But all of these grey provinces here in northern Russia and Siberia, those are all colonisable lands. If we just go and have a look down, you can see that there are some places in Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Australia, New Zealand, a lot of the island chains around them. If we go over here to Africa, you can see Madagascar's got some colonisable provinces on the end, along with some of the islands, and also around the Cape of South Africa, and also Western Africa has a few colonisable provinces as well. And most noticeably, if we go over to America, you will see that there are a lot of provinces here that you can colonise. There's North America and South America. There's still quite a bit of wasteland, but there are a lot of provinces here. Now, of course, if you are playing with the Conquest of Paradise mod, you can, well, Conquest of Paradise DLC, you can check the Random New World button, which will sort of scramble up the American continents, but you will still have a lot of colonizable provinces. Now, those provinces won't be available all the way throughout the game because there will be other nations that will also try to colonise. Not all nations do colonise, but there are definitely some that will. Particularly Castile or Spain, Portugal, France, England, they will generally all try to colonise. And you'll also find sometimes that other little nations just spring up. It's also worth remembering, especially when you look over here at the North American continent, if you actually look at some of these Native American tribes, particularly the ones that only have a single province, they have the ability to migrate to a neighbouring province. So providing they remain a one province minor, they can actually move around from province to province, providing they are empty. So that's all of the colonisable land. Now we're going to go into the game and actually talk about the way colonisation works. So I've loaded into a game that I've been playing on my channel where I am playing as Great Britain, and we're currently in the year 1593. The reason I've jumped into this game at this point is because colonisation isn't something that you can really do too early on in the game. It does take a little bit of time to get set up before you can do any colonisation. So the first thing you're going to need to do before you can do any colonisation is actually find yourself some of these empty provinces. Now, early on in the game, when it starts, you won't be able to see any of this stuff. It will all look like this area here. Terra Incognita, places that you haven't visited before. You have no idea what the territory is, and that includes sea tiles and land tiles. So how do you find these provinces that are in Terra Incognita? Well, there's two ways that it can be done. The first way is through natural discovery. If anybody in the same tech group uncovers a Terra Incognita tile, it doesn't matter if it's a sea tile or if it's a land tile, if anybody in the same tech group discovers a tile, then 25 years later that discovery will spread to everyone else in the same tech group. So for example, if we look at Portugal, Portugal are in the Western tech group, and if Portugal go and discover, let's say they go and discover Rio Grande over here, then 25 years later, everybody else in the Western Tech Group will get a message saying that the Rio Grande discovery has been spread. So you can always wait for somebody else to find the land, and it will spread to you eventually. And that goes for sea tiles as well. However, the most optimal way to discover the land is using your own explorers and conquistadors. Now, in order to get explorers and conquistadors, you need to have the correct idea group. What you need to do is you need to take exploration ideas and you need to grab Quest for the New World. The only way to recruit explorers and conquistadors is grabbing Quest for the New World. One notable exception is Portugal. Portugal actually start with an explorer. Now, at the beginning of the game, that explorer can only really explore the west coast of Africa until they do pick up the Quest for the New World. And that explorer does have the potential chance of dying, and he can't be replaced. So they start with a free explorer to give them a bit of a head start discovering the coast of Africa, which is one of the reasons why Portugal is really formidable in the colonisation game. But for everybody else, you need to grab the exploration ideas and get the Quest for the New World. Now, there's also expansion ideas, which is an admin group idea. Exploration ideas is a diplomatic group idea. And expansion ideas still gives you colonists, but you're limited to where you can send them. You can start with expansion ideas, and you can colonize provinces that have already been discovered by somebody else in your tech group. But exploration ideas is generally the best one for colonization. So the other way that you can discover what is in Terra Incognita, first of all, we'll talk about sea tiles. Now, the way it used to work was you could get a ship, pretty much any ship, and you could go and you could hire yourself an explorer. Now, the different types of leader that you have in EU4, you have generals and conquistadors, and you have admirals and explorers. Now, generals and conquistadors both lead land armies. Admirals and explorers both lead navies. Before the Art of War DLC, if you could get a conquistador, they would be just as good as a general, and an explorer would be just as good as an admiral. So you didn't ever really need to hire generals or admirals anymore once you could get conquistadors and explorers. They actually changed this in Art of War and made it so that conquistadors and explorers actually get about 20% less pips to use in combat. So a conquistador isn't quite as good as a general, an explorer isn't quite as good as an admiral, but they are the only leaders that can actually explore Terra Incognita. So what you need to do to explore sea tiles, you need to hire yourself a explorer, which will cost you 50 Diplo points. And what you used to do before Common Sense, no, not before Common Sense, before El Dorado, what you used to do was just put the explorer on a boat, and you could then just go and click in a Terra Incognita tile and sail there. You can't actually do that anymore. In order to explore ocean tiles, you must have either 3 light ships or 3 heavy ships, or a combination, it doesn't matter. As long as you've got 3 ships that are made up of lights and heavies. If I go ahead and group all of those together and make it into a fleet of 3 ships, you'll instantly see I get this pop-up up here telling me that the Explorer is ready. If I go and select those ships, you'll now see this button in the bottom right hand corner that says send fleet on an exploration mission. If I go and click that button, it gives me a list of places that I can send my Explorer to. Now, completing these missions will give you prestige. You're not supposed to suffer attrition while at sea when doing these missions. However, there does seem to be a bit of a bug as of patch 1.13, and I've lost quite a few fleets and explorers to attrition. This shouldn't actually happen. Now, you might find early on in the game that you don't have a long list of places you can explore like this. It's based on your Colonial Range, which is something that we will talk about later on in the video. But completing these missions will uncover certain areas of land, and it will give you prestige. So let's just go ahead and tell him to go off. And as you can see, he's automatically plotted a route. This time we're actually sailing around to Africa, but I can just go off and leave him to do that on his own. And as you can see, he's going to go into Terra Incognita. And the idea is I shouldn't have to micromanage him. He should be able to just go and do that exploration on his own and uncover those sea tiles. Now, as for land, we're going to go over here into the continent of South America. What you need is you need an army. It can just be as small as 1 regiment, but it's usually advisable to have a slightly larger army because you will be fighting lots of natives. And what you need to do is get yourselves a conquistador and assign a conquistador to that particular army. It is actually a conquistador that's leading the army here. Now, with the army selected, you can go and right-click on a terra incognita province and walk into it, which we're just going to do here. Let me just put the game speed up a little bit so you can see that. So this is a terra incognita province. We've got no idea what's here. We're going to walk into it. We're not going to arrive until the 13th of March, so I'm really just going to speed the game up just so that we will walk in there. And there we go, we have walked into that tile. Now we can see that that tile actually belongs to somebody else. It belongs to a Native American tribe, but we can select our army and we can right click into the next province. We'll arrive there on the 18th of April. And there we go, we have uncovered another tile of terra incognita. So that's something that you used to be able to do even before El Dorado, but a new feature that they've added now is this button here, the Hunt for the 7 Cities. If you go ahead and select this option, then your conquistador with his army will go off on their own and they will try and uncover most of the American continent. Doing this also gives you certain events and pop-ups that might happen, and perfect timing. Here's one that's just happened here. So this event has popped because we've actually got a conquistador exploring the 7 cities. And some of them are good, some of them are bad. As you can see, this one is a choice between losing some admin power or military power. There are some that give you a choice where neither one is good or bad, but you have to choose between them. And then there are some ones that just do give you benefits and bonuses. So there is a potential risk to having this method of exploration on, but once again it means you don't need to micromanage your conquistador. He will just go around the map and he will find all of the sort of provinces that haven't been discovered. So now you know how to discover the provinces, let's talk about colonisation. So we'll look at the map and we'll start by looking over here on the east coast of South America. Now the first thing you want to know is, can you actually reach them? There's a very important thing that determines how far away you can colonise, and that is based on your colonial range. Now you can find your colonial range by looking at your technology, and if you look under the Diplotech tab and look over here, you'll see a little log cabin with a red arrow above it, and that actually shows you what your colonial range is. Here you can see our colonial range is 475. Our colonial range is actually 712 because there are certain modifiers that do affect that. So that is our base colonial range. Now you will have certain things that also affect that, such as, for example, if we go into our idea group and we look at expansion ideas, we should have something in here. No, is it exploration ideas? There we go. Overseas exploration increases our colonial range by 50%. So that's very, very useful if you want to colonize in America. Now, if we go on to the map mode tab down here at the bottom, you'll see that there's a colonial range map mode. It's the same icon, the little log cabin with the red arrow above it. If we go ahead and click on that, and you will see a number of provinces change green or red. So basically, anything that is green is within our colonial range. Anything that's red is too far away. Now, the distance, your colonial range, is always measured from your closest unblockaded cored province with a port. So obviously any coastal province that you have a core on can be used to make the measurement, and it will always go from the closest one. And it's measured to where the port is on the province that you're going to colonize. So if we look over here, for example, you can see that most of these provinces here are green because we can colonize them. They're within range. If we take Panama as an example here, because this is a good example, very good example. Our colonial range is 712, and Panama is 190 distance away from our closest unblockaded core province with a port, which is Miami. And of course, Miami is just up here. We actually own this. So this is our closest cored province with a port, which means that Panama is 190 away. With a range of 712, we can easily colonize it. But look here, we've got Darien. Darien is 1,128 distance away. Well, how can that be? Because Panama is only 190. This province here is only 200. This province is 193. This province is 200. Why is this province 1,128? Why is this province 1,153? The reason for that is because this province and this province, when they become a city, they have their port on this side. Both of them do. So the effective range to these provinces, the green ones, is the distance from Miami straight down to here. It's a very short distance from Miami down to there. However, to get to those two provinces, the distance is basically all the way around South America and back up on the other side, because it's the only way to get to them by ship. Now, it's a little bit unintuitive because it doesn't show you anywhere on the province where the port is. You don't know which side it's going to be. It'll always be in the same place. It's something that was set by the developers. It doesn't change. It isn't random. But unless you know that why this happens, it can be very, very confusing as to why you can't colonize a random province. Of course, if we were to colonize one of the adjacent provinces, then we would be able to grab that because we would have adjacency. So let's talk about colonization and how it works. Let's go ahead and have a look at a province that hasn't been colonized. So you are limited to which provinces you can colonize. Now, in order to colonize, you need to have a colonist. And you can get colonists in several ways. You can get colonists from expansion ideas. You can also get colonists from exploration ideas. Now, in order to colonize something, it has to be within your colonial range. And it also has to be either coastal, or if it's inland, it has to have a core next to it. So, for example, if we go ahead and look at these provinces here, these two provinces, let's just go back into the normal map mode. These two provinces we own. Okay, we own these two provinces here. So we can colonize these inland provinces because these inland provinces are adjacent to our cores. And we can colonize these provinces, first of all, because they're adjacent to our cores, but they're also coastal. Just like these provinces here, they're all coastal, we can colonize them. But the inland provinces, we can't colonize them because they are too far away, because they can't reach the sea tiles, basically. They don't have a port, but if we have adjacency, we can colonize them. Now, if we go ahead and click on a province, you'll see we get a certain amount of information about that province. You'll see that the natives are animists. They pretty much almost always are. And you can see the base development of that province. You can also see any modifiers it might have, such as this one is tropical. And it has a narrow strait crossing to a neighbouring province. Now, the trade good that's produced here is unknown. You won't find that out until you actually get partway through colonising the province. But the important thing to take note of is this bit down here at the bottom where it tells you about the natives. You'll always see three things: the number of natives, the aggressiveness, and the ferocity. Now, the number of natives is just given as a flat number. And the aggressiveness and ferocity are represented by 1 to 10 hatchets for aggressiveness and 1 to 10 bows for ferocity. Now, the number of natives means the more natives you have, if the natives do pop up and rebel against you when you're creating a colony, if the natives pop up, more natives means you're going to have to fight more natives. But the plus side of having more natives in a province means that when you do colonize it, you get a reduction to local development costs. So a province that has more natives to begin with is going to be cheaper to develop in the long run. The aggressiveness indicates how likely the natives are to actually rise up and rebel against the colony. And the ferocity gives them a damage bonus. So for every 1 bow, they get a 5% damage bonus. And natives will also, if natives actually rise up in a colony, they can kill some of the settlers. And the number they kill, I believe, is a fraction of the total. So I think if you've got 1,000 natives, they kill, I think it's 5%. So they kill 50 settlers. So it's always a good idea when you are colonizing to make sure that you have a unit or some troops in the province, because that will mean you've got somebody there that can fight the natives when they pop. I'm just going to go and move this infantry into this province. Take him a few days to get there. He is going to arrive on the 29th of August. Now, very often when you move into an uncolonised province, the natives will actually rise up and attack. And as you can see, that's exactly what happened there. So just moving into or through a native province can actually cause them to rise up. Now, there are some provinces that you can colonise that, see, this one's only got 500 natives. There are some that don't have any at all. There are some provinces that have 0 natives. If there are 0 natives, then you can safely colonise them without having to worry about putting troops in them, because there's no natives to rebel. So what we need to do is we need to send a colonist there. And you can see it's going to take 149 days for the colonist to arrive. So I'm going to hit send. And you can now see that he's going to be there in 149 days. I'll unpause the game and he'll start to travel there. Colonists work differently to diplomats, for example. If you send a diplomat somewhere, the diplomat will arrive instantly and he will take time to return home. Colonists work the opposite way round. Colonists take a lot of time to arrive at their destination, and if you choose to recall a colonist, then they basically come home instantly. And there we go, our colonist has now arrived. So you've got a number of things here that you can see are going on. First of all, the religion changes to whatever our state religion is. And you will also see now that we have the culture of our nation. And you can see how many settlers we have. Now, there are currently 44 settlers here, and every city requires 1,000 settlers to turn it from a colony into a city. Now, you can see here that our growth is 110 settlers per year. And if you mouse over it, it will actually give you the breakdown of what generates that figure. And you'll also see that it says new settlers 32.5% chance. Again, if you mouse over, it gives you the breakdown and tells you how it comes up with that number. But as it says, the colonist working here has a 32% chance of attracting extra settlers each month. What that means is the colony will naturally grow by 110 settlers per year. But the colonist has a 32.5% chance of gaining extra settlers each month. So having a colonist at a colony can drastically improve the rate at which it grows. Now, if you actually have a look at the top here, you can see that I have a total of 3 colonists, and only one of those colonists is currently being used, which is the guy that is here. And if we look on the outliner, you might not have these displayed. You can always add them by clicking the little plus button at the top. And you can turn on colonists and you can turn on colonies. So the colonies will actually show you the population you have in that province. So as you can see, we had 53 last month. We've just gone up to 62 this month. And if you look at the colonists, the percentage is giving you a rounded percentage chance that that colonist has to increase the number of settlers. So you can see that information on the outliner. Now, it is possible to have more colonies than you have colonists, because what you can do is you can start a colony and then you could recall the colonist and send the colonist to another province, such as this one, for example, and we could start another colony. Now, I've removed the colonist from this province now. He's gone. But the colony is still going to gain 110 settlers every year, but there's no colonist now to give it that little chance of a boost every single month. So it's very, very important to try and keep your colonists in the colonies until they're finished, because it will get them finished more quickly. Now, if you go and have a look in your economy, and you can see your colonial maintenance here, you actually have to pay for each colony that you maintain. Now, you can reduce the slider. Reducing the slider will reduce the growth of the colony. So as you can see, at 100%, we have one colony, and the settler growth is by 120 per year. If we start to slide this slider down, the number of colonists we get per year will decrease. If we go below 50%, we'll actually lose settlers every year. The colony will start to die off. So you've got to be careful with that. Now, it also says, and it gives you the information here, if we have more than 3 colonies, the cost grows exponentially for those. So you're allowed to have as many colonies as you are allowed to have colonists. If you go above the number of colonists, then it gets really, really expensive. So you do really have to be mindful of that. And that's not just creating your own colonies. That also works if you seize a colony from somebody else as well. So let's just talk about that. So what you can do if you go to war with another nation that has a colony somewhere, let's say, for example, we go over here to, well, most of this is Spanish Canada and Florida, but if they had a colony like this one, for example, Portugal has that's not a Portuguese colony, that is natives. But there we go. Have they got a colony anywhere? No, I'm not going to be able to find one now, which is pretty typical. But the point is, oh, there we go. So France are building a colony here. So this is still a colony. Now, if we went to war with France and actually got troops into that colony, what we can do, we could siege and occupy it just the same as we could a core province. But what we can also do, you have this option. If you select an army, you'll see you've got two buttons down here. One says burn down colony and the other one says seize the province, which again works if it's a colony. So if you move into an enemy's colony and you hit the burn down button, that will destroy the colony completely. It'll send the colonist home and it'll reduce the population to 0 and it becomes an empty, uncolonised province. If you seize the province, then that colony becomes yours instantly. And you will have some problems. For example, if you take the colony from a nation that has a different religion to you or a different culture to you, that province will still have their culture and their religion, so you might have to convert it. And you will have to pay maintenance for that colony as well. So you do have to be very careful, because that's an easy way to go over your colony limit. Now, whenever you manage to complete a colony, when you get 1,000 settlers and it becomes a city, providing it is on a continent that isn't your home continent, you get a free core. So for me, playing as Great Britain, Great Britain's home continent is in Europe because that's where their capital is. Any province that I colonise in Africa, South America, North America, it instantly gives me a free core. If I was to go and colonise up here in Siberia, once it's colonised, I would have to core it. The same goes, for example, if I was playing as one of the African natives. If I was playing as an African native and I colonised a province in Africa, I would have to core it. But if I colonised a province in Europe, it would give me a free core on the province. Now, another thing that's very important to notice is if you look down on the map mode button, there is this button here that looks like a sort of raccoon skin cap with a gun, and that says Colonial Regions. If we go ahead and click on that, you'll notice that the map changes different colours, and you will see all these different colonial regions. So you've got Colonial Brazil, you've got Colonial La Plata, you've got Colonial Peru, Colombia, you've got the Colonial Caribbean, Colonial Mexico, Eastern America. You get the point. There's quite a lot of these colonial regions. Now, what happens is, and these colonial regions are only in America, if you have 5 core provinces in a single colonial region, then it will split off and become a colonial nation. And here's an example here. It's hard to tell because these are all little islands, but these are all separate provinces. So there's St. Vincent is 1, St. Lucia is 2, Martinique is 3, Dominica is 4, and Guadeloupe is 5. So 5 core provinces, all in the same colonial region, because this is the colonial Caribbean. And what will happen is when you get those 5, it actually splits off and becomes its own nation. So as you can see, this is not actually Great Britain. This is the British West Indies. It's a colony. They have their own leader. And they are a colony of Great Britain. So they basically become similar to a vassal in the way that they pay you money. They also push trade efficiency your way. They do have liberty desire. They do have their own armies as well. The difference between a colony and a vassal is that the colonial nations don't take up a relationship slot, so you can have loads of them, it's fine. Now, you only need 5 cores in a colonial region to get a colonial nation to break off. But if you get 10 cities, then you will actually get a free merchant. Now, once you've managed to get a colonial nation form, if you were to take any provinces in the same colonial region, it will automatically flip over to that colonial nation. So if I went ahead now and colonized this province, as soon as it becomes colonized, it gets an instant core, but as soon as it becomes colonized, it flips over and goes to this colonial nation. If I were to, let's say there was another civilization here, if I were to declare war on this civilization and I were to take that province from them, even if I took the province for myself in the peace deal, it would instantly flip over to the colonial nation. You cannot own provinces in a colonial nation. You cannot own provinces in a colonial region if you already have a colonial nation there. It will always flip over to the colonial nation. Now, it's worth noting that colonial nations can only form in a continent where your home isn't, where your capital isn't. So, as Great Britain, because my capital is in Europe, whenever I get 5 cores in a colonial region, I will get a colonial nation. If I were somehow able to get my capital over to North America, for example, I could just colonize lots of area and it would still belong to me because my capital would be in North America. But as my capital is in Europe, if I were to grab 5 provinces, it would form a new colonial nation. It's worth knowing that because there are some people that like to do a little trick which is called the Irish Exodus, which is where you start playing as one of the one province miners in Ireland. You basically try and colonize a province in North America as early as you can, and then you move your capital to North America and you can be a Western superpower and just grow exponentially in America. So it's worth keeping things like that in mind. Now, there are a few useful things that you can actually do with these colonial nations. We're going to go in and click on the subject interaction button here, and you can see at the bottom we've got the British West Indies. Now, when a colonial nation first forms, you have the option to give it a name. It'll name it for you automatically, but you can change it. You can also go in and change it at any time since Common Sense. You can actually go in and change the name of the subject. Now, you've got a few other options here that you can do. First of all, you have the option to placate local rulers. Now, what that will do is it will cost you 20 prestige, but it will reduce their liberty desire by 10%. So if they're thinking about rising up and fighting against you, it's one way to try and slow them down. You can get them to embargo your rivals on your behalf, just the same way that you can do with your vassals, protectorates, and union partners, but it does give them an extra 5% liberty desire. You have the option to spend admin points to increase and decrease tariffs. Increasing tariffs basically means that they will pay you more money, but at the same time, it will cause more liberty desire. You can do the opposite and lower the tariffs, which will reduce their liberty desire, but you'll get less money from them. And it's more expensive to reduce tariffs because it costs 100 admin points, whereas it only costs 50 to increase. The other two options here we haven't talked about. First of all is replace governor. So you can give them 10% extra liberty desire, but you can basically change the leader of that colonial nation. Now, why would you want to do that, for example? Well, if we go ahead here and look at the colonial West Indies, we can see that their government personality is a diplomat. And as it says here, the ruler is a diplomat. They will seek out powerful friends and attempt to expand diplomatically, but they are far less likely to go to war unless they are reclaiming lost territory. So a diplomat is basically going to try and make some diplomatic relations with other nations, and they will probably also go off and colonize. What we might want to do is we might want to replace the governor with a militaristic governor, because we might want our colonial nation to go to war with all of their neighbours. So that's the reason why you'd possibly want to change the governor type. So there is a reason for doing that. The final button we didn't talk about is this one here, which is start a colonial war. Now, before Common Sense, the only way to start a war between your colony and, well, between a colonial nation and their neighbour was to declare war on the neighbour yourself. Now, if you have a colonial nation next to somewhere else, you will get a colonial CB against them. But you would have to go to that nation and you would have to declare war, cite the colonial disagreement CB, and then your colonial nation would get dragged into the war automatically. They always get called into your wars. And the problem with that is it meant you would end up being all the way over here in Europe, and you'd have to be involved in a war which you weren't taking any part in. And of course, when you're at war, it causes you war exhaustion. It means coalitions are more likely to fire. It gives you reduced diplomatic reputation. It stops you from being able to do things such as integrate vassals and stuff like that. So what they've now done is they've added this ability to go into your subjects and to tell your colonial nations to start a war on their neighbours. So you can actually just force them to go to war now without actually having to declare war yourself, which is a really nice feature. So that's basically the basics of colonisation, how to start a colony, how to form a colonial nation and what you can do with them. There are a couple of similar things that I will just talk about in this video because I feel they are related. One of which is trade companies. Now, trade companies have changed slightly. If you go and grab any land in Africa or in India, and I think it has to be coastal provinces, what you can do with those provinces is you can select them, and you'll see there's a button down here which is next to the HRE button and the return province button. And it's a little, it's actually the trade icon. It's this sort of wooden crate. So the wooden crate on a shield with a little green plus. And that says, assign the province to your trading company. And this will give you less tax and manpower, but increase its value for trade. Now, the way it used to work before Common Sense is if you wanted a trade company, you had to get 5 provinces all together in the same region. You don't have to do that anymore. You can just have a single province. And if you go ahead and click that button, as you can see, what it will do is if I click that, it will give control of this province to the English West African Company. It will increase our local trade power. It will increase our naval force limit, but it will reduce our tax, our missionary strength, and our manpower modifier. I'm just going to go ahead and click that just to do it. And as you can see, it increases its autonomy greatly. We can remove that province if we want to. We can just go ahead and remove it. It's absolutely fine. Just reduce unrest as well by adding it to the trade company. It does reduce the unrest. So why do you want to do that? What is the point of creating a trade company? Well, apart from the fact that it does give you more trade power, if we go back in here and look at our interactions, you can see we've got the West African Company. And if we go ahead and mouse over here, we can see the English West Africa Company is not yet strong enough to claim to be one of the dominating trade powers in the area. You must have at least 51% of the province trade power in the region to become the dominant trade power. Now, that's very important. It says province trade power. So sending light ships there to protect trade doesn't count. You have to have 51% of the trade just from provinces, which comes from 2 things. First of all, it comes from your production development. So the more production development you have here, the more trade power you'll have. So if I just go ahead and just spend some points in there, we might need to pause the game for it to actually register that. Let's just go ahead and just click these because I don't really care. If we go and have a look at that now, yeah, 35.7%. I think it was a little bit lower than that just before, but I can't remember because I didn't really pay all that much attention to the numbers. I was looking at the wrong thing. Yep, conversion is very good. Not all that bothered. There we go. Let's just double check and see if that has actually gone up. Yeah, 35.7. I'm sure it was lower than that before. You also have the option to promote investments. It increases the trade power in all of the trade companies' provinces, but it does actually increase annual inflation. So if we go ahead and tick that, you will then see that we now have 39.1%. Now, if we get up to 51%, we get a free merchant. Now, what you want to do is, there's our explorer has returned that we did at the start of the video. So he's gone and docked up somewhere. He's actually gone and docked up at some French port here because in this particular game, France is a personal union partner of Great Britain. So he's docked up there, and now we can go and select him. We can go and click a new mission and send him off to go and explore somewhere else. But we were talking about the trading companies. If we go ahead and look down here on the map mode button, there is a trade company regions, the one on the bottom left. It's the same icon. It's that wooden crate in a shield. If we go and click that, you can see it shows us where all of the different trade companies are. So all of these ones here are in the West African Charter. you've got the South African Charter down here, you've got the East African Charter on this side, and obviously you can't really see much of the Indian stuff here because most of it's terra incognita, I haven't discovered it yet. So the idea is you want to try and get a series of provinces in one charter and get up to 51% or more of the local provincial trade power, and then you will get yourself a free merchant. So that's what you can do with trade companies. One very final thing, which is another change in common sense, is with protectorates. Now, a protectorate is basically any nation which is considered to be less advanced. It's usually a nation that isn't westernized. So, for example, if we are looking at Cebu down here, Cebu, they are a sub-Saharan government, so it considers them to be less advanced. You cannot, you can form an alliance, but you cannot make them into a vassal, as it says somewhere along there. We are too technologically advanced to become their ruler in a vassal, so they wouldn't become a vassal. However, they would potentially become a protectorate. Now, having protectorates before common sense used to be quite pointless, because what would happen, you'd have this protectorate who was technologically backwards, they didn't really do anything in a fight, and the only reason you were protectorizing them is so that if somebody else declared war on them, you'd get involved in the fight and you could protect your interests to stop somebody like Portugal, for example, stealing all of the coastal stuff around Africa. That's a good example of why you do that. But what they've actually done now is they've added some nice interactions for your protectorates. And we'll look at Jolof here, because Jolof are my protectorate. So if we go and look in the interactions here, you can see the options. We've got placate local rulers, which is pretty much the same as you have with the colonial nation, where you can spend 20 prestige to reduce their liberty desire by 10%. You've also got the embargo rivals, so exactly the same as you have with vassals, union partners, and colonial nations. You have the option to tell them to divert trade. So it increases their liberty desire by 30%, but they give up 100% of their trade power. Now that can be really useful, particularly if you are trying to get a trade company up and running. You can get them to give you their trade power. And you have the option to enable send officers. Now, sending officers costs you 33% of their army maintenance. So whatever Jolof's army maintenance is, we would be paying 33% of that, but it changes their liberty desire by minus 10%. It also gives plus 20% to the morale of their armies and 5% discipline. So if we pay 1/3 of their army maintenance, they get less liberty desire and we make their armies stronger, so they can be more useful in a war. If we go ahead and look at their liberty desire here, we can see that it is at 0%. So what we could do, if we go ahead and enable divert trade, puts them up to 15. Now I know that it does say that it increases it by 30, but what you've got to remember is liberty desire can never go below 0. So we were technically at minus 15, and now we've just gone up to a positive 15. So this protectorate now has 15% liberty desire, but they are diverting trade to us, which means if we now actually go and look at our trading company, it probably takes until the end of the month for it to clock over. Let's just wait for all these things to go. Well, they might not actually be in the right charter, and they might just not have a lot of trade power, but it is a good way to increase the trade power that you have. One final thing that you can do, which is one of the best things that they've added for protectorates in common sense, is if you actually go to them, you have a button here that says seize territory. Providing they have less than 50% liberty desire, you can click the seize territory button and you can look at their provinces. You can't take their capital, but you can look at any of their other provinces and go, Kale, I'd like that, please. Give me that, thank you. And that will increase their liberty desire by 35%. Now, of course, I will have to go and core this province, because it won't be cored to begin with. It's also going to be the wrong religion, and it's going to be the wrong culture group. But I've just managed to take a province away from a protectorate, and all I had to do was click a button. If we go back and look at that again, they've actually only got 49% liberty desire, which means I could go back in, seize territory, and boom, take another province from them. Now that's obviously put their liberty desire up now. Their liberty desire is now up to 64%, which means I couldn't take anything else from them. But that is a very, very nice mechanic that you can do with the protectorates. It seems a little bit overpowered. But there you go, I've waffled on long enough, but hopefully now you should be able to understand how to get a colony, how to discover new provinces, how to start and maintain and grow a colony, how to form a colonial nation, how to form a trade company and what they're used for, and some of the things that you can do with protectorates. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I'll see you on the next video, and until then, goodbye for now.